Victoria sat alone on a park bench, her coat pulled tight against the cold wind. Snowflakes drifted down, soft and slow, dusting the world in white. Her fingers were frozen as she held her phone, scrolling through emails, trying to ignore the feeling inside her. The world around her was peaceful, but inside, it felt like a storm was brewing. At 35, Victoria had everything. She was the youngest CEO in her company's history, smart, successful, and respected. But when she woke up that morning on her birthday, she felt something missing. No family called to say happy birthday. No friends stopped by to celebrate. It was just another day. Just work. She stared at the snow for a moment, her thoughts far away. Why do I feel so alone? Excuse me, ma'am, came a soft voice. Victoria looked up, startled. Standing in front of her was a little girl, maybe 5 years old, with light blonde hair tied in a messy ponytail. Her face was serious, and she held a well-worn teddy bear in one hand. Victoria smiled, but her heart tightened when she saw the girl's sad eyes. Yes, Victoria said gently. The girl stared at her for a moment, then asked in a small voice, "Are you sad?" Victoria blinked, surprised by the question. She didn't know how to answer. How could this little girl see right through me? "What makes you think I'm sad?" she asked. The little girl tilted her head. "You look like my daddy sometimes when he's really quiet. Like you're carrying something heavy inside." Victoria's throat tightened. The girl was too young to understand such things, but somehow, she did. Victoria cleared her throat. "Sometimes," she said softly, "I do feel sad." The girl looked up at her, eyes full of hope. "Are you lonely?" Victoria's heart sank. She wasn't ready to admit it to a child, but in that moment, she couldn't lie. "Yes," she whispered, her voice almost breaking. The girl's face softened with understanding. "I'm lonely too," she said quietly, clutching her teddy bear closer. "I don't have a mama. She's in heaven now. My daddy says she's watching over me, but I really wish I could talk to her. Sometimes I just want someone to do girl things with, you know?" Victoria felt something shift inside her chest. She had never known loneliness like this little girl, but in that moment, she felt it. Deep inside, she felt it. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Victoria said, her voice gentle. "That must be really hard." The girl nodded, her face serious. "Daddy says I should be strong, but it's hard. He's always working, and he doesn't know how to do girl things, like braids. Sometimes I just want a mama to do those things with me." Victoria blinked back tears. She had spent so many years building her career, but now, sitting on this bench, she realized she had nothing else. No family, no one to share her life with. Just work. "Can I spend a day with you?" The little girl asked suddenly, her voice small. "Just one day? You could be my mama for one day. We could do fun things like get ice cream or look at pretty things. You can teach me things like mamas do." Victoria's chest tightened. She didn't know what to say. She was a CEO, a busy woman with a tight schedule. But the girl's words echoed in her mind. "Just one day. Let me talk to your daddy first," Victoria said, her voice soft. "We need to make sure it's okay." The girl's face lit up with joy, like the sun breaking through dark clouds. "Really? You'll ask him?" "I'll ask him," Victoria said, standing up from the bench. They walked together towards the man who sat on a nearby bench, still talking on his phone. He looked stressed, his hand running through his hair, his face tight. "I understand the deadline," he was saying, "but I can't keep working 16-hour days. I'm a single parent. I need some flexibility." Victoria hesitated, then stepped forward. He ended the call and looked up. His tired eyes softened when he saw her. "Hi," Victoria said, holding out her hand. "I'm Victoria. Your daughter has asked me something, and I'd like to talk to you about it." The man, whose name was James, looked at her cautiously. "What's the request?" he asked. Victoria smiled gently. She asked if she could spend a day with me, to do girl things. She said she doesn't have a mama and that you're always working. I just wanted to see if you were okay with it." James's face softened, but he looked troubled. "I appreciate your kindness," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "but I don't want to impose." The little girl tugged on his sleeve. "But she's not a stranger anymore, Daddy. She's Victoria. She's really nice, and I think maybe we could all be less lonely together." Victoria felt something stir in her chest as she looked at the little girl. She knew what it felt like to be lonely. She'd spent years alone, wrapped in the cold comfort of her achievements. James looked at his daughter, then at Victoria. He seemed torn, but then he sighed, as if making a decision. "Can we sit down and talk about this?" he asked. They all sat on the bench together, the little girl between them. Victoria told him about her life, about being a CEO, about never having married, never having children. How she'd woken up that morning, on her birthday, feeling emptier than ever before. "I came here to think," she said softly, "to decide if this is the life I really want." James listened, nodding slowly. "She's a very perceptive little girl," he said. "I've tried to be both mom and dad to her, but it's hard. She needs someone I can't be. I can't teach her how to braid hair or do the things a mom does. I'm trying, but it's not enough." Victoria's heart ached for him. "What if we made this a regular thing?" she said quietly. "Not just for one day, but maybe every weekend. I could take Sophie for the day, do things with her. It would give you a chance to work or rest, and it would give me something I didn't know I needed." James looked at her for a long time. "Why would you do this?" he asked. "You don't even know us." Victoria took a deep breath. "Because your daughter asked me if I was lonely, and I realized that I am. I've spent my life building a career and forgotten how to live. I think maybe she could help me find what I've been missing." James studied her, then finally nodded. "Okay," he said. "We'll give it a try." Victoria's heart swelled. She had no idea where this would lead, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like the beginning of something real. "Thank you," she whispered. As they walked back to her car, Sophie skipped ahead, holding her teddy bear close. Victoria felt something stir inside her. A quiet promise, a hope for something more. Something she hadn't known she needed. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to this channel to support our growth. The following Saturday morning, Victoria stood outside her office building, looking up at the gray sky. The city was already bustling with energy, but she felt strangely calm. Sophie's words echoed in her mind. "Can I spend a day with you?" It had been a week since they'd made the decision, and now, it was time to see if the idea would work. The simple idea of spending a day with a little girl was overwhelming in its own way. Victoria hadn't let anyone into her life for years, certainly not in this way. Yet, somehow, it felt different with Sophie. She was only supposed to spend one Saturday with the girl, just to see how it went. But something about the request had touched Victoria deeply, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a favor. It was an opportunity to heal parts of herself she hadn't even realized were broken. Victoria glanced at her watch. It was time. She pulled out her phone to send a quick text to James. "I am on my way to pick up Sophie. Looking forward to it." Then, with a deep breath, she made her way to the park. When Victoria arrived at the little house where Sophie and James lived, she couldn't help but notice how different the neighborhood felt. It wasn't the kind of place where people owned fancy cars or wore designer clothes. It was homey and cozy, quiet in its own way. She rang the doorbell, feeling a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. James opened the door, a smile on his face, though it was clear he hadn't had much sleep. He looked exhausted, but there was a warmth in his eyes when he saw her. "Good morning, Victoria," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "Sophie's just getting her shoes on." "Thanks for letting me do this," Victoria said, her voice quiet but sincere. "I wasn't sure if you'd change your mind." James shook his head. "No, we're both grateful. Sophie's been looking forward to this all week." Victoria smiled and nodded. As James led her into the living room, she could hear the little pitter-patter of footsteps on the stairs. Sophie appeared, her brown coat on, her eyes wide with excitement. She was clutching Mr. Bear tightly in her hands. "Sophie," Victoria greeted her, bending down to the girl's level. "You look ready for an adventure." Sophie's face lit up. "I am. We're going to have so much fun today, aren't we?" Victoria chuckled, touched by the girl's enthusiasm. "Absolutely. I've got a whole day planned. Are you ready?" Sophie nodded eagerly. Yes. I can't wait to spend the day with you." The two of them left the house, with Victoria feeling a strange mix of nervousness and anticipation. She had no idea what to expect from this day, but it felt like it was going to be something big, something that would change both of their lives. They spent the morning at the Children's Museum. Sophie was so curious about everything, her eyes wide with wonder as she touched every exhibit and asked endless questions. Victoria couldn't help but smile as she watched the little girl's joy. "This is so cool," Sophie said, her face lighting up as she pointed to a large dinosaur skeleton. "Do you think it's real?" Victoria laughed, squatting down beside her. "I think it's as real as it can be, but I don't know if I'd want to meet one up close." Sophie giggled. "I would. Imagine how big it is. It's like the biggest thing ever." The two of them spent hours there, and Victoria found herself enjoying it more than she thought possible. She had always thought of herself as a serious person, always focused on her work. But Sophie's lightness and curiosity brought out a side of Victoria that she hadn't seen in years. When it was time for lunch, they found a small cafe nearby. Sophie sat across from Victoria at a tiny table, sipping her hot chocolate. She looked at Victoria with those big, hopeful eyes. "Victoria," she began, "can I tell you something?" "Of course," Victoria said, her voice soft. Sophie looked down at her mug, twirling the spoon slowly. "Sometimes I wish I had a mama to do things with. My daddy tries, but he doesn't know how to do braids, or paint my nails, or just talk like mamas do." She paused, her face turning slightly red. "I just wish I had someone to show me those things." Victoria felt a lump in her throat. She had heard the girl's sadness, but hearing it like this, spoken aloud, struck her heart. "I understand," Victoria said quietly, reaching across the table and placing her hand over Sophie's. "You're very brave, Sophie, and you're so strong. But you're not alone. You have me, okay?" Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away with her sleeve. "I know," she said, her voice small. "But sometimes, I still feel like I'm missing something." Victoria swallowed hard. I think I know what you mean. I felt the same way too, Sophie." The girl blinked in surprise, looking up at Victoria as though seeing her for the first time. "You? But you're a grown-up," Sophie said, furrowing her brow. Victoria nodded, her eyes soft. "Yes, but even grown-ups can feel lonely sometimes. Sometimes we forget how important it is to have someone to share things with. And I've realized that today." Sophie smiled, her face brightening. "I'm glad you're not lonely anymore, Victoria." Victoria smiled back, her heart swelling with emotion. "I'm glad too." As they left the cafe, Sophie skipped ahead, holding her teddy bear close. Victoria followed behind, her thoughts swirling. She had never imagined that spending one Saturday with a little girl could change her so deeply. James had been right. Sophie was teaching her something she hadn't known she needed. By the time they got back to her car, Sophie turned to Victoria, her eyes shining. "Thank you for today," she said softly. "This has been the best day ever." Victoria knelt down and hugged Sophie tightly, her heart full. "You're welcome, sweetheart. I'm so glad you had fun. And remember, anytime you need me, I'll be here." As Sophie hugged her back, Victoria felt something stir in her chest. She had built a career. She had built an empire. But this was something she had never known she needed. This was real. It had been a few weeks since Victoria had started spending Saturdays with Sophie, and something had shifted in her. At first, it felt like a nice distraction from her busy life, a brief escape from the constant pressure of being the CEO of a growing company. But now, the weekends had become something she looked forward to more than anything else. Victoria couldn't pinpoint exactly when it happened, but the moments with Sophie, the quiet ones, the small conversations, the shared laughter, had become her anchor. Her work had always been her priority, her source of identity. But now, as she picked Sophie up every Saturday, she felt herself growing in ways she hadn't expected. She found herself making room in her schedule, something that was nearly impossible before. She delegated more at work, gave more trust to her team, and even started leaving the office a little earlier than usual. And it wasn't just about work anymore. It was about life. One Saturday, after a day spent at the zoo, Victoria drove Sophie home, the girl's excitement still buzzing in the air. The ride back was quiet for a while, with Sophie in the back seat, humming a song to herself. Victoria glanced in the rearview mirror and smiled. The girl had a way of making everything feel lighter. Sophie was so full of life, so full of wonder, and it made Victoria realize just how much she had been missing. When they pulled into the driveway of Sophie's house, James was already outside, waiting for them. He smiled when he saw them, but there was something in his eyes, a mix of warmth and something else. He had always been kind to Victoria, but she had noticed lately that there was a different kind of connection between them. As Victoria parked the car, James walked over. Sophie was out of the car and running towards him before Victoria had even fully turned off the engine. "Hey there, pumpkin," James said, scooping her up in his arms. Sophie giggled, her teddy bear still tucked under her arm. Victoria watched them for a moment, her heart full. It was impossible not to see the bond they shared. James had done his best to be both mother and father to Sophie since her mother passed away. But even as he carried that heavy weight, there was something about him that made Victoria want to stay. "How was your day?" James asked Sophie, his voice soft, but with a hint of exhaustion in it. It was so much fun, Sophie exclaimed. Victoria let me pet a kangaroo, and we saw a huge giraffe. It was amazing. Victoria smiled as she got out of the car. We did have fun, she said. She wanted to take a picture with every animal, so we ended up with 1,000,000 photos. James chuckled. That sounds like Sophie. Sophie wriggled free from James's arms and grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the door. Can we get ice cream now? She asked, her eyes wide with hope. James laughed again, his eyes meeting Victoria's. I'm sure we can manage that. As they headed inside, Victoria stood for a moment on the front porch, feeling something unfamiliar. She had come to expect their weekends together, but today felt different. It wasn't just about Sophie anymore. It was about them. All three of them. She hadn't meant for it to go this way. She hadn't planned on getting so close to Sophie or to James. But there was something in the way they fit together, like pieces of a puzzle she never knew were missing. That evening, after dinner, as they all sat together in the living room, James turned to Victoria, his expression serious but soft. Victoria, he said slowly, can I talk to you about something? Victoria looked up from where she was sitting on the couch with Sophie, who was busy drawing on a piece of paper. Of course. James took a deep breath, as though he were choosing his words carefully. I've been thinking a lot about how things are going with you and Sophie. And with me. Victoria's heart skipped a beat. She knew he wasn't talking about anything casual. They had spent so much time together these past few weeks, and she had felt that pull, that deep connection. But she hadn't been sure how to put it into words. I don't want to make this complicated, James continued, his voice low, but I've been realizing how much I appreciate what you've done for Sophie. What you've done for me. Victoria swallowed, not sure where this conversation was heading. James, I'm happy to be here. I know I've said this before, but I really mean it. Sophie has brought so much joy into my life. James nodded, but there was a hesitation in his eyes. I know, he said softly, and I've been trying to figure out how to tell you this without making things awkward, but I can't keep pretending I'm not feeling something more. Victoria froze. Her heart raced as she looked at him, not sure what to say. What do you mean? She asked carefully. I mean, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm falling in love with you, Victoria. The words hung in the air between them, as still and heavy as the silence that followed. Victoria's heart pounded in her chest. She had never expected this, hadn't even thought about it. But now that he had said it, something in her stirred. The connection between them had been growing, but she had been too focused on the uncertainty of her own feelings to admit it. James, she started, her voice trembling. She didn't know what to say, didn't know what to feel. Part of her wanted to say she felt the same way, but another part of her was scared. What if this changes everything? Sophie looked up from her drawing, sensing the shift in the room. Her small voice broke through the silence. Are you two going to get married now? Victoria and James both laughed nervously, but inside, Victoria's heart was racing. Sophie was too young to understand, but in that moment, Victoria realized just how deeply she had already become part of their family. I don't know about marriage, pumpkin, James said, ruffling Sophie's hair. But maybe, just maybe, we can see where this goes. Victoria nodded, her mind swirling. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to find love, let alone in this way. But somewhere deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Victoria and James both knew the weight of their unspoken feelings, but neither of them was ready to put words to it just yet. Instead, they continued with their quiet routines, finding comfort in their shared time with Sophie. The weekends were filled with laughter, adventure, and small moments of connection. But there was a tenderness building between Victoria and James that neither of them dared to acknowledge. Each Saturday, Sophie's excitement grew. She had begun to refer to Victoria as her special person, and every time she said it, Victoria's heart tightened in a way that both scared and comforted her. She had never allowed herself to get close to anyone like this, never let someone in, not even her closest friends. But with Sophie, and now with James, something was different. One evening, as Victoria sat at her desk, finishing up the last of the day's work, she received a text from James. It was simple, but it made her heart skip a beat. Can I call you later tonight? Her fingers hovered over her phone for a moment before she replied, of course. The text was followed by a short pause before another one popped up. It's about Sophie. Something happened at school today. Victoria's stomach tightened. She quickly locked her phone and leaned back in her chair, trying to prepare herself for whatever it was. Sophie had seemed happy, full of life. What could have possibly happened? When the call came, Victoria didn't hesitate. She answered immediately. "Hello," she said, her voice steady, though a little unsure. "Hey, it's James," came his voice on the other end, soft but filled with concern. "I'm sorry to call so late, but I think you should know something." Victoria's pulse quickened. "What's wrong? Is Sophie okay?" "She's fine," James reassured her. "Physically, anyway. But something happened at school today. She came home upset. One of the other kids, well, they made a comment. They asked her why she didn't have a mom, and it upset her more than I thought it would." Victoria felt her heart break. "Oh, James, I'm so sorry." James sighed. "I knew it would come up eventually, but I wasn't ready for her to hear those kinds of questions. She's been so strong, so brave, and I don't want her to feel like she's missing something." Victoria closed her eyes for a moment, her heart aching. Sophie's little face flashed in her mind, her bright eyes full of wonder and joy. But now, Victoria knew that there was a vulnerability there she hadn't fully seen before. "Do you want me to talk to her?" Victoria asked quietly. "I can come over, if you think it'll help." There was a long pause before James spoke again, his voice quieter now. "If you can. I think she could use someone who isn't me. I don't know how to explain it to her, not like you could." Victoria's heart clenched. It wasn't just about explaining things. It was about being there for Sophie in a way that went beyond the surface. It was about showing her that even though she might not have a mother, there were people who cared for her, people who would be there when she needed them. "I'll be there in a few minutes," Victoria said firmly. "I'll bring ice cream, and we can talk about it, okay?" James's voice softened with relief. "Thank you. You don't know how much this means." Victoria hung up the phone and grabbed her coat. The night felt colder than usual as she made her way to her car. She didn't know what exactly to say to Sophie, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't let the little girl feel alone in this. When she arrived at James's house, she was greeted by Sophie, her eyes puffy from crying. James stood by the door, his face filled with concern. "Hey, sweetie," Victoria said gently, crouching down to Sophie's level. She held up the ice cream container as if to offer a distraction. "I brought ice cream. Do you want some?" Sophie hesitated, her small hands wringing together. "I don't want ice cream," she said softly, her voice tinged with sadness. "I want my mama." Victoria's heart broke at the words, but she stayed calm, keeping her voice steady. "I know you miss her, sweetie. I can't replace your mama, but I'm here for you. And I'm not going anywhere." Sophie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to hold back more tears. "Why did that kid ask me about my mom? Why don't I have one? I don't understand." Victoria reached out and gently took Sophie's hand, feeling the weight of her words. She had always been so strong, but the cracks were starting to show. "I don't have all the answers," Victoria said softly. "But I can tell you this. No matter what anyone says, you are loved. You are not alone. And it's okay to miss your mama. It's okay to feel sad. But I'm here for you. I'm always going to be here." Sophie looked at her, her eyes wide, unsure. "Really, really," Victoria said, squeezing her hand. "I might not be your mama, but I'm someone who cares about you. You're my special girl, Sophie, and nothing will ever change that." Sophie sniffled, and then a small smile appeared on her face. "You're my special person, too, Victoria." Victoria felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of peace settling over her. She hadn't realized how much this little girl had come to mean to her until this moment. She wasn't just someone she was helping, she was someone who had helped her. As they sat down together, Sophie in her lap, Victoria held her close. The bond between them had grown stronger, not because of the things they did together, but because of the unspoken understanding they shared. Victoria's heart swelled with something she hadn't expected, a sense of belonging, of family. It was a small step, but a step that was leading her somewhere she never thought she'd go. And as the ice cream melted in the quiet room, Victoria realized that this was just the beginning of something much deeper, something that could change everything. The weeks following the night with Sophie were filled with small moments of healing. Sophie seemed lighter, more at ease, and Victoria couldn't help but feel a deeper connection growing between them. But even as they spent more weekends together, there was an undercurrent of something unsaid, an unspoken truth that Victoria could feel just beneath the surface. Victoria had become a regular part of their lives, not just on Saturdays, but in little ways throughout the week. She'd taken to calling Sophie just to check in, to ask how her day had gone. It was something she never imagined doing for anyone other than herself. But now, with Sophie, it felt natural, necessary. One Thursday afternoon, Victoria sat at her desk, organizing her schedule when her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but something inside her urged her to answer. Hello. Hi, is this Victoria? The voice on the other end was calm, but had an edge of urgency to it. Yes, this is Victoria, she replied, already feeling a twinge of anxiety in her stomach. This is Dr. Simmons, Sophie's pediatrician, the voice continued. I wanted to speak with you about something concerning Sophie. Victoria's heart skipped a beat. What's wrong? Is she okay? There was a long pause before the doctor answered, his tone carefully measured. It's nothing serious, but we've noticed a pattern. Sophie's been having some physical symptoms, headaches, stomach aches, and we're starting to think they may be related to stress. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. Stress? Sophie was just a little girl. How could she be under stress? I'm sorry to worry you, Dr. Simmons continued, but I wanted to bring it to your attention because it seems to be affecting her more than we anticipated. It might be a good idea for her to talk to someone. A therapist, someone who can help her work through whatever might be weighing on her. Victoria's mind raced. She hadn't considered that. She had seen Sophie's sadness, but it had always been so quietly hidden beneath her bright smile. It never occurred to her that the girl might be carrying more than she let on. Thank you for letting me know, Victoria said softly. I'll speak to James and see what we can do. As soon as she hung up, she grabbed her phone and immediately dialed James's number. It only rang once before he picked up. Hey, Victoria, James greeted. How's everything? James, I just got off the phone with Dr. Simmons, Victoria said, her voice tight. He's concerned about Sophie. He thinks she's been under a lot of stress lately, and it's showing physically. He suggested we get her some help. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Victoria could feel the weight of James's concern, even through the phone. Stress? He finally asked. But she's been so happy, so full of life lately. I didn't think. I know she misses her mom, but I didn't think it was affecting her this much. Victoria felt the same way. Sophie had seemed more at ease recently, but maybe that was just a front. Maybe she was still carrying the weight of her mother's death in ways no one had realized. I think it's not just about missing her mom, Victoria said carefully. It's about everything. The questions from other kids, the feeling of being different, the fact that she doesn't have what other kids have. A mom to do all those things with. I think it's been building up inside her. James was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. I don't know what to do. I'm trying my best to be both parents to her, but I can't be everything. I'm afraid I'm failing her. Victoria's heart broke at his words. She knew he was doing his best, and she knew how hard it was for him. But she also knew that Sophie needed more than just her father. She needed the kind of guidance that only a mother could provide. And Victoria wasn't sure if she was ready to fill that role. James, she said softly, you're not failing her. You're doing everything you can. But maybe it's time we both step in and find a way to help her deal with everything she's been carrying. James sighed. I don't know. It feels like I'm too late to fix it. I can't undo the past. You're not too late, Victoria said firmly. It's never too late. We can help her. We just need to be there for her. For both of you. They agreed to set up an appointment with a child therapist, and within a week, Sophie was seeing someone regularly. The process wasn't easy. At first, Sophie was hesitant to open up. But with time, she began to share her fears, her sadness, and her long-held pain. Victoria and James did everything they could to support her. On weekends, Victoria would continue to spend time with Sophie, doing all the things that helped her feel safe and loved. They went to the park, painted, baked cookies, and had long talks about the things that scared them both. And slowly, Sophie began to heal. But even as Sophie grew stronger, Victoria realized that she was still holding something back, something deep inside her that had been buried for years. She had opened her heart to Sophie, but what about herself? What about the parts of her that had been neglected for so long? One evening, as they all sat together in the living room, Sophie leaned against Victoria, her small head resting on her shoulder. James was in the kitchen, making dinner, when Sophie suddenly looked up at Victoria with wide, trusting eyes. Victoria, she said softly, are you lonely too? Like I was? I think you were before you came to visit us. Victoria felt a lump in her throat. How had Sophie known? How had she understood her in ways no one else had? She didn't know how to respond at first. But then she realized that Sophie had given her the answer herself. Yes, Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible. I was lonely, sweetheart. But now I'm not. Sophie smiled, her face lighting up. Good. You're my family now, Victoria. And we're all going to be okay. Victoria smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She had spent so many years building her career, focusing on success. But in this small, quiet moment, she realized that everything she had worked for, everything she had wanted, wasn't worth much without the love and connection she had found with Sophie and with James. And in that moment, Victoria knew that everything had changed. This wasn't just about being there for Sophie. It was about being there for herself, too. Finally, she was building something real. It had been nearly a year since Victoria first met Sophie, and in that time, everything had changed. The lonely, determined woman who had once believed that success was the answer to everything had found herself in a new kind of life, one filled with family, love, and connection. Sophie's transformation had been incredible to watch. She was no longer the quiet, withdrawn little girl who carried the weight of the world on her small shoulders. Instead, she was a confident, joyful child, full of life, her laughter ringing through the house every Saturday. Therapy had helped, but it was the support of the people around her, James and Victoria, that had truly made the difference. James, too, had changed. No longer consumed by the pressure of trying to be both mother and father, he had learned to lean on others, to trust that he wasn't alone. The walls he had built around his heart had slowly come down, one moment at a time. And now, his eyes always sparkled with hope when he looked at his family. And Victoria? She was no longer just the high-powered CEO. She had allowed herself to be something more, a daughter, a sister, a mother figure. She had found what it meant to truly connect, to build something that wasn't measured in profits or achievements, but in love, time, and shared moments. It was Christmas Eve, and the house was filled with the warm scent of pine and cinnamon. Victoria sat by the window, watching as snowflakes drifted down, covering the world in a blanket of white. The Christmas tree sparkled in the corner, its lights twinkling like stars. Sophie was in the living room, putting together a gingerbread house with James, their laughter filling the room. Victoria smiled softly, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had never imagined this would be her life, never thought she'd find herself here, surrounded by the family she never knew she needed. As the evening drew to a close, they gathered around the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa and sharing stories. Victoria felt Sophie snuggle closer to her, and she wrapped her arms around the little girl, her heart full. I'm glad you're here, Victoria, Sophie said softly, her voice full of trust. You're my family. Victoria kissed the top of her head. And you're mine, she whispered. James looked over at them, his smile warm and content. You know, I've been thinking, he said slowly. I never thought I'd find someone like you, Victoria. But now I can't imagine life without you. Victoria's heart raced, the words she had been avoiding finally bubbling to the surface. I feel the same way, she said quietly. I never knew how much I needed this. How much I needed both of you. James reached out, taking her hand gently. We've built something together, haven't we? Victoria nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Yes, we have. Something I never knew was possible. As the fire crackled softly and the snow continued to fall outside, Victoria realized that this was what it meant to be truly alive. Success and achievements were fleeting, but the connections she had made, the love she had found, would last forever. She had learned that the most important thing in life wasn't what you built, but who you built it with. And so, in this quiet moment, surrounded by the family she had chosen, Victoria finally understood. It wasn't about finding perfection. It was about finding home. This journey reminds us all that we often look for success in external things, career achievements, recognition, wealth. But true fulfillment comes from the connections we make with others. It's the people who show us love, who help us grow, who stand by us through thick and thin that make life truly meaningful. This story teaches us about healing, forgiveness, and how sometimes the answers to our loneliness lie in the most unexpected places. The moments of joy, the simple acts of kindness, and the willingness to open our hearts can transform our lives and the lives of others. Never underestimate the power of a small act of kindness. A single question, a single gesture can change a life forever. And when you open yourself to love and vulnerability, you allow the deepest connections to flourish. Take this with you as you move forward in your own journey. No matter where you are in life, no matter the challenges you face, remember, you are not alone. Surround yourself with those who care about you. Reach out to others who might need you. The connections you build today will be the foundation for your tomorrow. No matter how tough life may seem at times, remember that the hardest moments often lead to the most beautiful transformations. Keep pushing forward, even when it feels difficult. Every step you take toward healing, toward connection, is worth it. And remember, the people who love you will always find their way back to you. You are worthy of love, of happiness, and of all the good things this world has to offer. Keep believing in yourself, because you have the strength to overcome anything that comes your way. As we close this chapter, remember, you are stronger than you think, and sometimes the greatest adventure is simply opening your heart to those who need it most. Merry Christmas to each and every one of you. May this season fill your hearts with joy, your homes with love, and your lives with beautiful connections. Keep spreading kindness and love. It's what truly makes the world go round. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to this channel to support our growth. We will appreciate your opinion about this story and where you are watching from. Thanks for watching. See you in our next story.